George Kambosos Jr. is seen to be stalling the fight between Devin Haney and himself by picking other options and not fighting Devin Haney for undisputed. Let's talk about it in this video. King Jr. got another video for y'all. So we've been hearing a lot of things about George Kambosos Jr. lately on why the fight has not came to fruition between him and Devin Haney for undisputed. So I'm going to start it by saying this. George Kambosos Jr. is caught up with the same scenario that Teofimo Lopez is caught up. He thinks he's undisputed. As you go on George Kambosos Jr. on social media pages, George Kambosos Jr. Says that he undisputed. At first, it said he was a unified lightweight world champion, but now he's saying that he's undisputed. And George Kambosos Jr. is on record saying that he's on record saying that it's not about the money. It's all about the legacy and really fighting Devin Haney for undisputed. And now he has certainly changed his tune and told Devin Haney, you should sell your jury because you're going to need a lot of money to pay me if you want this fight to happen. And George Kambosos Jr. was looking at a couple guys within Gervonta Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, and Lomachenko. Gervonta Tank Davis and Floyd Mayweather team is not interested in George Kambosos Jr. belts, and they're not going to Australia to fight George Kambosos Jr. And Floyd Mayweather is not going to pay George Kambosos Jr. the biggest amount of money. So if you decided to make that fight between him and Gervonta Tank Davis, you're not going to get your biggest bag. Now, him versus Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia has damn near been out the ring for about 2 years now, ever since the Luke Campbell situation. Now Ryan Garcia is just a smokescreen to basically be a duck for not have to fight Devin Haney or whatever not. So what does Ryan Garcia bring to the table? A social media following, and you're not going to get your biggest bag with Ryan Garcia because I believe he made $300,000 in his last fight. Now he was talking about saying that he wanted to fight Lomachenko as well. Well, Bob Arum I'll give you a perfect example. Bob Arum was not willing to pay Sean Porter more than $1 million to fight Terrence Crawford, and at the end, Bob Arum wound up paying Sean Porter $4 million to fight Terrence Crawford. So Bob Arum is not looking to pay George Kambosos Jr. big money because he believed that him and Teofimo Lopez colluded to get more money. And, the scenario went on from there. But Bob Arum is not going to pay George Kambosos Jr. the money as well because George Kambosos Jr. is not a big star. But a lot of people feel like that Lomachenko can beat George Kambosos Jr. And there's another reason why that fight might not happen between George Kambosos Jr. and Lomachenko because Lomachenko doesn't want a rematch clause. So he feels like that George Kambosos Jr. doesn't deserve a rematch clause. And so I believe George Kambosos Jr. might have a rematch clause. So if George Kambosos loses, he has to rematch. And Lomachenko does not want to do a rematch clause. So, and like I said before, Bob Arum, I don't believe he's going to pay George Kambosos Jr. the amount of money that Devin Haney is going to pay George Kambosos Jr. Now, I said all those other options. All those guys should be out the picture. George Kambosos Jr. should be fighting Devin Haney. And you're going to make your biggest bag. If you're telling Devin Haney to sell your jury and stuff like that, George Kambosos Jr. probably going to be making at least $5 to $6 million. Clearly, if he asks for $8 million, he's pricing himself out because George Kambosos Jr., even though Devin Haney has the money, he's not going to pay you $8 million. I mean, you really haven't done nothing. You just beat it. Teofimo Lopez that beat the man and stuff like that. So with that being said, I believe George Kambosos Jr. really doesn't want this fight. He says he wants to fight. He said he was going to fight Devin Haney in April. That has gotten turned down. He said he's going to fight Devin Haney in June. April, then he said May, and then he said he was going to push it back to June. And the reason why he's pushing it back that far is because George Kambosos Jr. wants to fight either Lomachenko or Devin Haney in Australia. And reports have it that Australia is not open up to 100% capacity. So you're trying to drag Devin Haney at Australia, even though Devin Haney got vaccinated and agreed to everything you agreed to. And you got guys like Chris Mannix out here making up lies about Devin Haney, saying that the contract Devin Haney wouldn't sign a contract, so the deals has been stalled. And Bill Haney had to go on a couple of shows and say, what does Chris Mannix talk about? We didn't turn down no contract or anything like that. So it all has been a big shebang with George Kambosos Jr. team making up lies. And then George Kambosos Jr. came back and says you can't believe anything from the horse's mouth, because George Kambosos Jr. says, I have never said or anything sent something like that to Devin Haney's team or whatever or not. So it all becoming a big mess. But George Kambosos Jr. Could potentially be fighting Devin Haney or Lomachenko, which I don't think Bob Arum's going to put up the money in June. Why not fight Devin Haney? If you're really that confident that you can beat Devin Haney, go ahead and just fight the man. But I don't understand why George Kambosos Jr. is stalling. Devin Haney is agreeing to everything you agree to. He's waiting for Australia to open up at 100% capacity, because he might not have a chance of beating Devin Haney in Las Vegas or beating Devin Haney on a neutral ground plan. A lot of people feel like Devin Haney shouldn't fight George Kambosos Jr. in Australia because of the Manny Pacquiao and Jeff Horn situation. Some people feel like that Manny Pacquiao should have beaten Jeff Horn. And a lot of people said Manny Pacquiao was winning against Jeff Horn, but they said he was getting robbed. It's been a while since I've seen that fight. I don't know really what happened. A lot of people say Pacquiao really won the fight, but a lot of people wants Devin Haney to fight George Kambosos Jr. in a mutual ground plan. And this all is going to fall back on Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn got to get a deal done and make this fight happen, or we're not going to get this fight at all. So with that being said, guys, George Kambosos Jr. is seen to be holding up this fight between him and Devin Haney by picking other options. Well, your other options declined you so far, and you just need to go ahead and make the fight. And so George Kambosos Jr. is really the one that's stalling this fight. With that being said, guys, it is what it is. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. This is your boy King Jr. I'm out of here. Peace.